Let's hit just one more house, the one with the flickering light.
Did you see that?
The year I turned 13, my friend invited me and 2 others to stay over at his house for Halloween night. His place sat on the edge of town, big, quiet, and perfect for trick-or-treating. The kind of neighborhood where houses were spaced far enough apart that you had to really commit to walking between them, where streetlights flickered with that orange Halloween glow and jack-o'-lanterns grinned from every porch. It was around 9 o'clock when we decided to hit one last street before calling a night. Our pillowcases were already heavy with candy, pulling at our shoulders with that satisfying weight that meant a successful Halloween. The air had that perfect autumn chill, cold enough to make your breath visible, but not so cold that you needed more than a jacket over your costume. We walked up the sidewalk toward an old house that sat slightly back from the street. It wasn't decorated like the others. No carved pumpkins, no fake spider webs, no skeletons dangling from trees. Just a single porch light that flickered on and off in an uneven rhythm, casting uncertain shadows across the peeling paint of the front door. The 3 of us hesitated at the bottom of the steps. Something about the place felt off, though I couldn't have told you what. Maybe it was too quiet. Maybe it was the way the windows seemed dark despite the porch light. Or maybe it was just that every Halloween needs at least one creepy house, and this was ours. My friend, the one whose house we were staying at, shrugged and started up the steps. We followed, our shoes scuffing against the old wood. He reached out and pressed the doorbell. We heard it echo inside, a hollow electronic chime that sounded too loud in the quiet night. For a moment, nothing happened. We were about to turn around and leave when we heard footsteps inside. Slow, uneven footsteps that seemed to drag slightly with each step. The door creaked open, and a tall, thin woman stood there in the doorway. She had shoulder-length hair that hung limp and unwashed around her face, and her skin was pale, not just light-skinned, but pale in a way that suggested she didn't go outside much. She wore a faded floral housecoat and slippers, and the smell that wafted out from behind her nearly made me gag. Stale cigarette smoke, thick and overwhelming, mixed with something else I couldn't quite identify. Something musty and old. She looked down at us with tired eyes and smiled weakly. "Sorry," she said, her voice raspy and rough. "I don't have any sweets left, but maybe I can find something." Before any of us could tell her it was fine, that we didn't need anything, she turned and shuffled back in the house, leaving the door open behind her. We stood there on the porch, exchanging awkward looks. My friend made a face and mouthed, "It smells so bad," and one of the other guys pretended to gag. We could hear her rummaging around inside, opening drawers or cabinets, the sound of things being moved around. It went on for what felt like forever, but was probably only a minute or 2. Finally, she came back, holding a wrinkled brown paper bag. She held it out toward us with both hands, and I could see what was inside. Candy, but not the kind you want to eat. The wrappers were faded and dusty, some of them torn or crushed. The colors looked wrong, like they'd been sitting in a drawer or closet for years, exposed to heat and humidity until they'd changed into something else entirely. A few pieces looked sticky, clumped together in a way that made my stomach turn. We all took an instinctive step back. No thank you," my friend said, trying to be polite. "We actually have a lot of candy already. We should probably get going." We started to turn away, already thinking about the next house, already trying to forget about the smell and the strange woman and her bag of ancient candy. That's when she reached out and grabbed my friend's arm. Her fingers wrapped around his wrist with surprising strength, her grip tight enough that he gasped. Her face changed. The weak smile disappeared, replaced by something desperate and pleading. Her eyes went wide, and her voice dropped to almost a whisper. "No, please." It wasn't a question. It wasn't even really a request. It was somewhere between a command and a plea, and it made every hair on the back of my neck stand up. My friend yanked his arm free, and we bolted. We ran down those porch steps so fast I'm surprised none of us tripped, our candy bag bouncing against our legs, our hearts pounding. Behind us, I heard the door slam shut with enough force to rattle the windows. We didn't stop running until we'd made it to the next block. When we finally slowed down, gasping for breath, we tried to laugh about it. Try to turn it into a funny story, another weird Halloween experience to add to the collection. But none of us were really laughing. Not really. We knocked on a few more doors after that, but our hearts weren't in it anymore. The fun had gone out of the evening, replaced by a vague unease that none of us wanted to acknowledge. We kept glancing over our shoulders, kept our voices a little lower, stuck a little closer together. We were cutting through the parking lot of a housing complex, taking a shortcut back to my friend's house, when we heard the screaming. At first, I thought it was just someone's Halloween decorations, one of those motion-activated props that shrieks when you walk past. But then I heard the words. "They took my child. They took her. Give her back." The voice was raw and hysterical, full of genuine anguish that cut through the Halloween atmosphere like a knife. We rounded a corner and froze. It was her, the same woman from the house. But she looked different now, wilder, more frantic. Her hair was disheveled, falling across her face, and she was wearing the same housecoat but had thrown on shoes this time. She was in the parking lot, slamming her fists against a car, screaming at the top of her lungs. "Please, please give her back. They have my daughter." My friend went pale. "That's my mom's car." We stood there in shock as the woman continued to beat against the windows, her voice cracking with desperation. "She's in there. I know she's in there. Let her out." Doors started opening in the surrounding apartments. People came out onto their balconies, looking down at the commotion. A few neighbors rushed down, and I recognized one of them, an older man in a cardigan who seemed to know the woman. "Come on now," he said gently, taking her by the shoulders and trying to pull her away from the car. "Come on, let's get you home." "No," she screamed, fighting against him. "They have her. They took my baby." Another neighbor, a woman in her 40s, came over to us. She looked embarrassed and concerned. "I'm so sorry about this," she said, keeping her voice low. She's not well. She gets confused sometimes. She doesn't have a daughter. She never did." The man in the cardigan had managed to get the woman a few steps away from the car, though she was still struggling, still crying. "I saw her. She was right there. That tall one, he had her." "There's no one there," the man said patiently. "Look, see? The car is empty." We watched as they slowly led her away, back toward the complex. She kept looking back at us, at the car, her face twisted with grief and confusion that looked far too real to be fake. The woman who'd spoken to us smiled apologetically. "Really, I'm so sorry. This happens sometimes. She means no harm. She just gets confused." My friend's mom, who'd been sitting in the driver's seat through all of this, finally unlocked the doors. We piled in quickly, none of us saying anything. She didn't ask what had happened. Maybe she'd figured it out. Maybe she just saw the looks on our faces and decided questions could wait. She started the engine and we drove away fast, leaving the parking lot and the screaming woman behind. I looked back through the rear window and saw her still standing there, the neighbors on either side of her, watching us go. Back at my friend's house, we tried to shake it off. We made popcorn in the microwave, the kind that comes in the bag and fills the whole kitchen with that artificial butter smell. We put on a horror movie, something with a mass killer, the kind of scary that felt safe because it was obviously fake. We sprawled out in sleeping bags in the living room and tried to laugh about the night's events, tried to turn them into stories we'd tell at school on Monday. But underneath the jokes and the bravado, I could tell we were all unsettled. The woman's desperation had been too real. The way she'd looked at us, like she genuinely believed we'd taken something from her, had been too intense to just brush off. Around midnight, we were still awake, the movie playing, but none of us really watching it. That's when the hallway light turned on. We all noticed it at the same time. The glow seeping under the closed bedroom door, turning the gap into a bright line against the darkness. We went quiet, pausing the movie, listening. "Your parents checking on us?" one of my friends whispered. The friend whose house it was shook his head. "Maybe, but they usually just open the door if they want to say something." We waited, expecting to hear footsteps, expecting the door to open and his mom or dad to tell us to keep it down or go to sleep. But nothing happened. The light stayed on, and nobody came in. After what felt like several minutes, curiosity got the better of me. I'd always been the one who couldn't leave things alone, who had to know what was happening. I crawled out of my sleeping bag and crossed to the door. "What are you doing?" my friend hissed. "Just looking," I whispered back. I put my hand on the doorknob and turned it slowly, trying not to make any noise. I pulled the door open and peered out into the hallway. It was empty. The hall light was on, bright and harsh after the darkness of the room, but there was no one there. Both of his parents' bedroom doors were closed, no light showing underneath. The bathroom door was open and dark. "There's nobody here," I said, confused. My friend came up beside me, looking out. "That's weird. The light turns on by itself sometimes, but usually only when someone walks past a sensor." "There's a sensor?" "Yeah, in the ceiling. It's supposed to turn on when it detects movement and then turn off after a few minutes." We stood there, looking up at the small round sensor in the ceiling. It had a little red light on it, blinking slowly. "Maybe it's broken," I suggested. "Maybe," but neither of us really believed that. We stood there for another moment, and I was about to close the door and go back to the sleeping bags when my friend suddenly grabbed my arm. "Look," he whispered and pointed. I followed his gaze to the sliding glass door at the end of the hallway. It led to a small balcony that overlooked the backyard. And, standing in the backyard, just at the edge of the porch light's reach, was a figure. For a second, my brain couldn't process what I was seeing. It looked like a person, tall and thin, just standing there in the darkness. Then my eyes adjusted, and my blood turned to ice. It was her, the woman from the house, the woman from the parking lot. She was standing perfectly still in the middle of the backyard, maybe 20 feet from the house, just staring up at the glass door. At us. Her face was pale in the darkness, her eyes reflecting the light from the hallway like an animal's. The second she realized we'd seen her, that we'd made eye contact, she turned and ran. Not walked, not shuffled like she had earlier. She ran, fast and fluid, disappearing into the shadows at the back of the yard where the property line met the woods. I slammed the door shut and locked it, my hands shaking so badly I could barely turn the deadbolt. My friend ran to check the front door, then the windows. We woke up the other two friends, and all four of us did a complete circuit of the house, making sure every door was locked, every window was secured. We didn't tell his parents. I don't know why. Maybe we thought they wouldn't believe us. Maybe we thought we'd imagined it. Maybe we were just too scared to put it into words, afraid that saying it out loud would make it more real. We sat in the living room with all the lights on, whispering frantically to each other, trying to make sense of what we'd seen. How had she found the house? How had she known where we were? Had she followed us from the parking lot? But we'd been in a car, and she'd been on foot. It didn't make sense. None of us wanted to admit we were terrified. We were 13, on the edge of being teenagers, too old to be scared of things in the dark. But we were scared, deeply, bone-achingly scared. Eventually, exhaustion won out over fear. One by one, we drifted off to sleep, still sitting up in our sleeping bags, the TV playing quietly in the background. I woke up to morning light streaming through the windows and the smell of coffee. My neck was stiff from sleeping sitting up, and my mouth tasted terrible. The other guys were still asleep, sprawled out in various uncomfortable positions. I got up and walked into the kitchen, where my friend's mom was standing at the counter pouring coffee into a mug. She turned when she heard me and gave me a smile, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. She looked tired, and there was something else in her expression. Something worried. "Morning," she said. "Sleep okay?" "Yeah, elite. Fine." She nodded, but she was looking at me strangely. Did anything weird happen last night?" My heart started pounding. "What do you mean?" She set down her coffee mug and crossed her arms, hugging herself like she was cold even though the kitchen was warm. "I had the strangest dream. At least, I think it was a dream." She paused, and I could see her deciding whether or not to continue. I woke up in the middle of the night, and I could have sworn there was someone in my room. A woman standing at the foot of the bed, just staring at me. The blood drained from my face. I must have gone pale because she immediately looked concerned. "Honey, are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." The other guys had woken up and wandered into the kitchen, drawn by our voices. They stood in the doorway, and I could see from their faces that they'd heard what she said. "What did she look like?" my friend asked his mom, his voice barely above a whisper. His mom looked surprised by the question, but she answered. "Tall, thin, with shoulder-length hair. Pale face. She was wearing some kind of nightgown or housecoat, I think." She laughed nervously. "Why? Do you know who I'm talking about?" We didn't answer. We just stood there, looking at each other, and I could see the realization dawning on his mom's face. "Boys," she said slowly, "what happened last night?" But none of us could find the words to tell her. How do you explain something you don't understand yourself? How do you tell someone that the woman from their nightmare was real, that we'd seen her too, that she'd been in the backyard staring at us? And the worst part, the part that made my skin crawl and still makes it crawl to this day, was that we'd locked all the doors and windows. We'd checked them twice. So if his mom really had seen that woman standing over her bed, if it wasn't just a dream, how had she gotten inside? We left that afternoon, all of us making excuses about needing to get home, about things we'd forgotten, about being tired. My friend's mom didn't push us to stay. I think she could sense that something had happened, something that had shaken us all. I never went trick-or-treating again after that Halloween. Neither did the other guys. We didn't talk about it, didn't make some pact or agreement. We just stopped, and we never told anyone else what happened that night. The weird thing is, I went back to that neighborhood a few years later, driven by curiosity and the foolish confidence of being 16 instead of 13. I wanted to find that house, the one with the flickering porch light and the woman who smelled like cigarette smoke. I wanted proof that it had been real, that we hadn't all shared some bizarre collective hallucination. But I couldn't find it. I walked up and down every street in that area, looked at every house, and none of them matched my memory. It was like the place had never existed. My friend moved away the summer after that Halloween. His family relocated for his dad's job, and we lost touch. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he never really liked talking about that night either, that he changed the subject if anyone brought up Halloween. Sometimes when October rolls around and I see kids in costumes running from door to door, their laughter echoing through the streets, I think about that night. I think about the woman with the desperate eyes and the bag of old candy. I think about her screaming in the parking lot, so convinced that we'd taken something from her, that she'd followed us home. But mostly, I think about what my friend's mom said that morning, about the woman standing over her bed in the darkness, just watching. Because here's the thing that keeps me up at night. All these years later, we saw that woman in the backyard. We watched her run away into the woods. We locked every door and every window after that, checked them twice to make sure. So if she really was standing in that bedroom, staring down at my friend's sleeping mother, when did she get inside? Was it before we saw her in the yard? Was she already in the house when we did our check, hiding somewhere, waiting? Or did she find a way in after, some entrance we'd missed, some window that didn't quite latch? Or, and this is the possibility that truly terrifies me, was she never outside the house at all? Was what we saw through that glass door just a reflection, a glimpse of something that was already inside, already standing behind us in that hallway, watching us watch her? I don't know. I'll never know. And maybe that's the worst part. All I know for certain is that sometimes on Halloween night, when I'm alone and the house is quiet and the shadows seem a little darker than they should be, I think I hear it. That same desperate voice from all those years ago, echoing from somewhere I can't quite place. They took my child. They took her, and I wonder if she's still looking, still searching, still convinced that someone, somewhere, has what she lost. I wonder if she's still out there, standing in backyards, peering through windows, waiting for someone to let her in. And I wonder, God help me, I wonder if one night I'll wake up and see her standing at the foot of my bed, that pale face staring down at me in the darkness, finally finding what she's been searching for all these years. I hope I never find out, but I check my locks every night anyway, just in case. If this story made you question every shadow in your house tonight, you're not alone. Subscribe to STF Horror Vault and join thousands of horror fans who dare to listen to the most terrifying true stories and unexplained encounters that will haunt your dreams. Smash that like button if you're brave enough to admit this one got under your skin, and drop a comment below. Have you ever had a strange encounter on Halloween night? Ever met someone who just felt wrong? Share your story with the Vault community. Hit the notification bell so you never miss our next nightmare. We post new spine-chilling stories every week, and trust me, you don't want to face the darkness alone. Remember, the scariest monsters aren't the ones in costumes. They're the ones who knock on your door when you least expect it. Stay scared, stay safe, and welcome to the Vault. STF Horror Vault, where your nightmares come true. And whatever you do, check your locks tonight.